Welcome. Thanks for taking the time, investing in the time today, looking at some of the Brexit issues. What I would say to you is the media can be unhelpful in this because every day the news changes. I've been doing this since July 18, and the message is the same, is focus on your business and the issues facing your business. Get the right advice and take it from there. But don't worry about the broader political issues, as they don't inform well as to what happens. I'm an international economist with Scottish Development International. However, I'll try and make all my comments UK-wide. So there are resources here from the Scottish Government, but also the UK Government has an excellent site and website with pretty similar resources there. And there's a lot of information and links to HMRC, the Customs Office, etc., that people can access, and through your own trade association, I'm sure they'll be making lots of resources available. So the first slide up there is step one really is identify the issues. So on our website, which any UK company can use, is slightly Scottish specific, but the same principles are established. You can download the checklist and it'll identify what potential risks that you may have. So, you know, do you export? Are you a manufacturer? Do you import? You know, are you selling services abroad? You know, what's your VAT issues? Do you employ EU nationals? So all those kind of issues will be asked in there. If you answer that those are issues, then the next step is to look at the various actions. Now, for many companies, these actions can be quite simple. It can be making sure that you've got your new EORI number from HMRC, that you can still export or import. So, you know, there's some simple steps there, some documentation steps that are now that you have to do going forward. So there's a number of steps there that you're required to do. There's other ones that are perhaps more complex and worry you more. So for instance, if your VAT situation is complex, where you're having to sell across Europe, then you may want to spend a bit more time looking at what you're going to do in a post-Brexit scenario. Deal or no deal, any proposal to come out of the EU will mean that we're leaving the VAT system. So we will be a third country in that regard, and therefore you'll have to look at those issues. Also, if you're an importer, you're going to have to look at that as well, and just see what so even if you're not an exporter, you know, what's your import position? Are you buying goods and services from overseas? Those may be from non-EU countries, and therefore you want to see what the risks there are. So very much looking at your supply chain, examining your supply chain, and just seeing where that works best. One of the upsides from companies doing this, to say, since last summer, is that by examining their supply chain, they've been able to optimize it. Because what's been happening is that a lot of companies, things worked well, and therefore they were quite happy. You know, the anecdotal story about the mini gearbox crossing the channel 3 times before it ends in a mini. That's quite a simple supply chain. There's some very, very complex supply chains. One company we worked with was exporting 40% into Germany, and they said, you know, I have no idea why we don't have a warehouse in Germany. So they set one up so that they could, instead of shipping it from the UK, they could actually do next day delivery in Germany and really look after their customers. So, you know, there's lots of things you can do there. Indeed, one other option is you look at import or export. You know, if somebody's supplying you, you may look to find a second source, particularly a UK source, you know, that you maybe haven't been looking at before, just to make sure that you're, especially if it's a critical element in your supply chain, just to make sure that, can you find it in the UK? Can you find it at a price that works for you? So, you know, those are some of the things that can help you. Yeah, so I was talking there about the self-assessment tool. There's lots of advice and resources on the UK website and the Scottish Government website. Lots of good documents. There's lots of webinars on key sectors and the general issue, you know, even down to some basics like what is free trade, what is Brexit, etc. So, you know, you don't need to go hunting through complicated websites to get the answer. You can look at those things directly. Also, there's lots of events across the UK. There's lots of events in Scotland at the moment, of which this is one, which the UK government have funded and supported. But through the length and breadth of Britain, there's a whole range of events, either webinars or bricks and mortar events that you can actually go to and get some of your questions answered. HMRC have a duty to support you in any of these questions. I know sometimes that can be difficult, but you just need to pursue that, as well as all the VAT authorities if you have issues. Your accountant is a good source. Just make sure that they understand the international issues going forward. It may be that they're quite small and they've not had full appreciation of some of these issues. So that's perhaps just an area that you want to look at to make sure you're getting the right advice on some key issues. Documentation's a big area as well. The UK government are offering grants until January 2020 to help with the professionalisation of company staff. And I think that's administered through PwC. You'll get the link on the UK government's Brexit website and on the Scottish site as well. So there's grants there, because the one thing that, no matter what, you know, whether we retain some of the EU powers or we have a no-deal Brexit, we will have to have more documentation, more export documentation. And for many companies, whether you're an importer or an exporter, that's not been required due to the single market. So those things we have to learn how to do commodity codes and all the invoicing that goes with that and the documentation that goes with that, and that the professionalization. So those grants are available to do that. I'll skip this one. Just pick up some case studies. In Scotland, there are grants to support it. I think there's support in England as well. But I think, nevertheless, the grant, lots of companies have been more proactive and looked at how their business operates, perhaps find new clients, speak to their customers, find new sources of supply, etc. So it's actually been quite a positive thing in terms of the business, and just focusing on what the business issues are. You know, that you can look at new ways of running your business and making sure that it's optimized better and perhaps reducing some of the risks. So the final slide here is covering a whole stack of areas. One at the top there is safeguarding your workforce. Now, this is quite a complicated one. There is a lot of good information around. The UK government is supplying a lot of information here. But if you have EU nationals working for you, or indeed you in the UK or an overseas establishment, you would want to familiarise yourself with some of the issues going forward and make sure that, one, that they're comfortable and you've briefed them and spoken to them, and then see what their individual issues are for, you know, whether they want to register for status in the UK or whether their status is okay. So, you know, there are a lot of changes there. There is a lot of good information, but I would say the best thing is, you know, don't leave it to chance. Actually go and speak to your employees either here or overseas to make them comfortable, because they will all have quite individual issues and they'll have different motivations. Some of them will be entirely comfortable, want to stay here. Other ones will be perhaps thinking about not remaining in the UK or not feeling secure. So all advice from companies that I've dealt with is to make sure that they're happy and, you know, find what needs to be done and do it fairly quickly so that they don't miss any of the deadlines in relation to EU nationals in the UK. Some of the other easy ones that I've picked on is that, you know, all VAT registered businesses will be sent an EORI number. If you're below VAT registration, you can apply for one, but it's a little bit more complicated because the online system really looks for a VAT number. So it's something you perhaps want to phone the VAT office and say, I'm a sole trader or whatever, I'm not VAT registered. Perhaps not all the companies would have that, but make sure that that number has came to you. Also register for simplified importing procedures. That's another easy win for you. There's a lot of support out there as well from the UK government and the Scottish government, so make sure you're applying for that to help your business. I think one of the most important ones, though, is we've dealt with about 500 companies over the period from middle of 2018. One of the key things is to speak to your customers and suppliers. You know, sometimes companies are reluctant because they think, well, look, if we have a conversation, the prices will go up and they want to renegotiate the contract. But I think the best advice is to have a discussion with them, reassure them that you still want to trade with them, still want to do business, and find out ways that they can alleviate that situation. I know there's lots of companies in the UK that supply into Germany, and that conversation, particularly in some of the key sectors there, that's went fairly well by just, you know, having those discussions and making sure that everybody understands. Most of the EU 27 countries, especially the Northern European ones, have told their companies to find substitutes for British suppliers, not necessarily switch, but just do the due diligence and find a supplier in case that becomes an issue. So, you know, you want to make sure that you have that conversation with your customers and suppliers, that they're going to continue to trade with you, they're not nervous, and, you know, that you continue that business relationship irrespective of tariffs and regulatory procedures. Just to say finally, that there will be changes potentially to the tariff situation going forward, particularly in a no-deal Brexit, which may or may not occur. I see it looking at the news today, but let's ignore that part of it. So that, you know, you can go on to the World Trade Association site, which will be on the UK government site. If you have your commodity code, you can plug it in and find out what your tariff is, whether it's import or export, so you quite understand what the risk is. For some companies, the tariffs are quite small, but it really depends on your profit margin. You know, 6% might not sound a lot, but for some businesses that could be difficult. For food and drink areas, and I know that's perhaps not the sector on today, but some of those tariffs can be very high, 40%, etc. So you can go on there and check. Now, the plan for the UK government in the event of a no deal is that for importing any raw materials or semi-finished goods wouldn't be subject to tariffs, I think, for a year. But products that are completed, like a car, for instance, would be subject to those tariffs. So they've waived that in a no deal scenario, but that's only for 12 months. So you can go in and check. It then makes you realize that you need to understand your commodity code. HMRC are are honour bound to help you with that commodity code if you don't know how to access or get the right one. So, you know, just pursue them. I think sometimes they've got a lot of new staff and sometimes it can be difficult, but you just want to pursue that. They've got the right to make sure that you get the right commodity code. And most of the advisory bodies like ourselves or UK government should be able to help you and direct you on that. Okay, so that's the main points. Happy to take questions if there's anything there that is particularly a burning issue for you, or you need clarity on, or you're having sleepless nights over, or indeed you're just curious to understand what the process is. So thanks for your time.
We'll have a look. Is that a question in there? Open. So someone is saying that they have members in Europe who upload data to our servers. Will there be any barriers to this after Brexit? Do you know the answer to that?
Yep, the GDPR arrangement is in place. The UK government are saying that it will roll over and apply to the UK, but you're just going to have to watch how that is integrated, because what the Theresa May proposal was, and indeed the Boris Johnson proposal, was that we would set up our own regulatory bodies, so for a variety of industries. Now, the question is, will there be mutual recognition agreements on areas like GDPR or distance selling and those data issues? They say there will be. The key thing is, will those mutual recognition agreements be available in time, and particularly in a no-deal Brexit where things happen dramatically. So you would need to watch that one. It should be okay, particularly if there's a transition agreement, and there would be time to get mutual recognition agreements in place. However, it's not just a matter of the tariff arrangements. The UK government proposals are to create their own regulatory bodies and not depend on the EU one. So it means then there has to be harmonisation and mutual recognition agreements put in place. So the biggest risk there is obviously in a no-deal Brexit situation, where that in the short term that wouldn't happen. The UK government, in my understanding, has said that GDPR would carry on, at least in the short term anyway. They didn't have any, for some industries, aviation, food and drink, and the chemical regulations, they do intend to create separate bodies. So that's my understanding. I hope that helps.
We have another question, which is, we send training booklets and documents to European training centres. Will we have to consider these as exports after Brexit and make customs declarations?
Yes, if we are out of the EU, then we'll be out of the VAT system. So you will have to, it would be seen as an export because you're outside of the EU. If we're in the transition agreement, currently proposed up till 2020, then everything would be normal. And the idea then is there would be a treaty between ourselves and Europe, and hopefully your areas would be covered. So in the light of a no-deal Brexit or no agreements in place, yes, it would be. And likely going forward it would be, because we would be outside the VAT system and outside of the single market, because that's certainly the current proposal.
And someone has asked, is there more clarity over the position regarding Northern Ireland?
Okay, I think there's been a great deal of discussion on that. I was speaking to colleagues this morning about it, and my understanding is that the proposal was that goods that are bound for Northern Ireland would be treated as UK, providing they were consumed entirely in Northern Ireland. However, anything that was then part of a supply chain or for onward sale into the EU, which is the Irish Republic, would be subject to tariffs. Now, on the surface, that sounds simple. What I haven't seen is how that's going to work in practice, because there would have to be submissions. Would it be the company that would have to say and sign the customs declaration that this is entirely for consumption in Northern Ireland? Or what proof or what checks there would be at places like Cairn Ryan in Scotland on the ferry across there? So the principle is what they're referring to. The actual detail, I think, has still got a very long way to go, and the details of exactly how those checks and local content issues, etc., are still, I would say, fairly fragile, because you can understand that how do you absolutely determine that's going to be consumed entirely in Northern Ireland and not for any onward sale into the Republic? So that's the devil's in the detail in that one. That's the principle that they've tried to achieve. I hope that answers your question.
Don't have any other questions, I don't think.
Okay, they were really good questions, really good. So thanks for that, and happy to take them if there's any emails. Happy to take them offline if you require further support.
Yes, I think that's fine. That's all the questions that we've got today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, delighted. Thanks for organising.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.